I had contacted Admiral Bobby Ray Inman, who was the head of the National Security Agency in the United States, Deputy Director at CIA, Director of Naval Intelligence, and a variety of intelligence posts, a technologist, and clearly someone that if this was really accurate, that there really were UFOs and non-human intelligence around, this is a man who had to know. So I was able to contact him thanks to a contact through Admiral Lord Hill Norton here in the UK. And this conversation, he alarmingly not only indicated that these issues were covered under national secrecy laws, but that the United States government did in fact have possession of the hardware associated with this. In other words, this was an actual physical phenomenon. As
a craft, a spaceship.
Several of them, and they were in operational condition, which I assume suggested that they had been in contact, that they had been given these craft for some reason or another, because they certainly weren't crashed vehicles.
Okay.
Let me be clear. UAP are real. Advanced technologies not made by our government or any other government are monitoring sensitive around the globe. Furthermore, the U.S. is in possession of UAP technologies, as are some of our adversaries.
The UAP task force was refused access to a broad crash retrieval program.
When you say crash retrieval, what do you mean?
These are retrieving non-human origin technical vehicles, call it spacecraft if you will, non-human, exotic origin vehicles that have either landed or crashed.
We have spacecraft from another species.
We do, yeah.
Here's exactly what I was thinking. I'm going out there with, my mindset was like this. I'm going to go out and set up an entry control point for a downed aircraft, a crashed. We're going to go ahead and tag classified material and body parts. That's what I'm thinking. And then we're going to set up the entry control point so we can get emergency response vehicles out there. When I got up to the area where I seen it wasn't an aircraft crash, and it was something that I couldn't identify, I was perplexed, not understanding what I was seeing. I hadn't been trained for anything even close to that, So here's the gear adjustments that were switching were just crazy. I went from crash and recovery thoughts to I don't know what I'm looking at. I don't know what is in front of me. I'm confused.
A non-human intelligence craft landed in Rendlesham Forest. A military witness even managed to touch the craft. Let's talk about it. Hi everyone, I'm Anomaly Files, and today I will be diving deep into the Rendlesham Forest incident, December the 26th, 1980. The Rendlesham Forest incident unfolded over multiple nights, involving dozens of military personnel and left behind physical evidence, audio recordings, and a written memo that would later be released under the Freedom of Information Act. The events occurred in late December of 1980 near RAF Woodbridge and RAF Bentwaters, two US-operated NATO bases in Sculf, England, and it was at the height of the Cold War. Both of these installations were rumored to store nuclear weapons, something UAPs have been seen to be interested in. The first sightings began in the early hours of December 26, when Air Force security personnel observed a group of strange lights descending into the nearby Rendlesham Forest. Thinking it might be a downed aircraft, a team including Sergeant Jim Penniston and Airman First Class John Barrows entered the woods to investigate. What they encountered was a small, triangular-shaped craft resting on three legs, no more than 3 meters across. The craft emitted a blue and red glow, and the air around it was dense, electricity-charged, and disturbingly quiet. Penniston took it a step further. He reportedly walked around the craft, carefully examining its surface, which he described as metallic, black glass-like, and warm to the touch. He even made physical contact with it, and claimed to see symbols etched into the hull. It resembled ancient Egyptian-style hieroglyphics. He drew these in his notebook immediately afterwards. Then, without a warning, the object slowly lifted off the ground and accelerated away silently through the trees at an incredible speed, defying every known laws of aerodynamics as we know them. But this strange activity didn't stop there. Over the next 2 nights, different teams of military personnel witnessed more inexplicable phenomena. Lights darting through the sky, beams of energy descending into the forest onto the base itself, and strange orbs that would split and rejoin in mid-air. On the night of December 28th, Deputy Base Commander Lieutenant Colonel Charles Halt, initially skeptical of the whole event, led a security team into the woods to see for himself. What he witnessed forced him to reconsider everything. As his team approached the original landing site, they observed a pulsating red light in the sky that moved through the trees in a deliberate, intelligent manner. At one point, Halt described it splitting into multiple white objects, which hovered and then shot away. His experience was captured in real time on an audio recorder, which still exists today and is considered one of the most compelling elements of this case. Halt later submitted an official report, now referred to as the Halt Memo, which described the events in formal language for the administrative defense. This memo, though understated in tone, validated that something highly unusual had taken place. Radiation readings were also taken at the landing site, showing levels significantly higher than the surrounding forest, a key physical trace that suggests some form of advanced energy source had touched down in the area. All this took place within miles of the secured military facilities believed to house nuclear weapons. And if you're into UAP history, you would know that these objects had been seen or around nuclear facilities, and maybe this incident had something to do with the UFO nuclear connection. Lieutenant Colonel Charles Halt, who was a deputy base commander at the time, wrote the memo to the British Ministry of Defense on January 13, 1981, about 2 weeks after the event. The memo provides a summary of what occurred, written in a straightforward way. Despite its reverse language, the details are very interesting. Halt describes strange lights moving through the forest, physical damage to trees, impressions on the ground consistent with landing gear, and elevated radiation readings measured with military equipment. What makes the Halt Memo particularly compelling is that it is an official document written by a high-ranking officer, and not by a report from a civilian witness. The credibility of Rendlesham Forest incident shows us largely on the testimony of military witnesses, many of whom were highly trained and had high-level security clearances. And among the most prominent are Sergeant James Penniston, Airman First Class John Burroughs, and Deputy Base Commander Lieutenant Colonel Charles Halt. Penniston's detailed report stood out because of how closely he interacted with the craft. He described its texture as smooth and glass-like and noted a warm sensation upon touching it. He even claimed to have seen strange symbols on the craft's exterior, which he sketched it in his notebook at the time. Burroughs, who accompanied him, experienced missing time and later sought medical treatment for radiation exposure, a condition the US government initially denied him records for until years later, thinking it was some sort of cover-up. Halt, on the other hand, tried to take a more measured approach. His audio recording from the final night captures him calm but bewildered commentary as he and his team watch the lights. Over the years, Halt has gone on record to state that what he saw was not of this world and that the event was downplayed by both UK and the US authorities. Another compelling witness was Master Sergeant Ray Gullis, who claimed to have been present during one of the nights of the sightings. Though his name doesn't come up as frequently in mainstream accounts, Gullis later provided statements indicating that strange lights were not only seen in the forest, but also appeared to be doing maneuvers with intelligent control, like zigzagging and hovering mid-air. He also noted an eerie silence during the event, describing how natural sounds of the forest seemed to vanish entirely, a detail shared by several others and often reported in other high-strange cases. Another often overlooked yet significant account comes from Colonel Conrad, who was the base commander at the time. Though initially more skeptical, Conrad acknowledged the professionalism of the men involved and did not question their sincerity. Internal base memos and correspondence indicated that Conrad took the matter seriously enough to support an investigation, even as pressure mounted from higher up to contain the story. His proximity to the chain of command and the balance he tried to maintain between transparency and damage control has led some researchers to believe there's far more happening behind closed doors than the public was ever meant to know. As well as military personnel, several British police officers who responded to calls from the base that night also provided statements. While they were not allowed into the forest proper during the height of the activity, The reports acknowledged the unusual activity shown by the American airmen and the strange lights seen from a distance. One officer even suggested the lights didn't resemble anything conventional, such as planes or a lighthouse, despite common debunking attempts pointing to those explanations. Lastly, it's worth noting that some personnel who were stationed at RAF Bentwaters and Woodbridge later reported memory loss, unexplained physical symptoms, and a reluctance to talk publicly that definitely gave many questions about whether there had been efforts to suppress some activity. Shortly after physically touching the strange, metallic, triangular craft that had landed in the forest, Staff Sergeant James Penniston experienced what he described as a telepathic download, a stream of binary code that flooded his mind. This wasn't a fleeting thought or hallucination, but a vivid and intense mental vision of ones and zeros flashing in his mind. Feeling compelled to record what he saw, Penniston said he immediately began jotting down the binary sequences in a notebook, though he told no one about it for years. It wasn't until 2010, 30 years later after the event, that he publicly shared these notes. Once the binary code was made public, Penniston had it analyzed by individuals with programming and data decoding skills. When the sequences were translated using ASCII binary to text, the message they allegedly contained read, quote, "Exploration of humanity, continuous for planetary advance," end quote. In addition to this phrase, the binary included a list of geographical coordinates that corresponded to a number of ancient and historically mysterious sites across the globe. These included the Great Pyramids of Giza in Egypt, the Nazca Lines in Peru, the Temple of Apollo in Naxos, Greece, and even coordinates linked to Hai, Brazil, a legendary island from Celtic folklore that is said to appear and vanish off the coast of Ireland. The implications of this were very, very interesting. Danny Sheehan, an attorney who spent a large part of his career dealing with government secrecy and classified information, had an experience while working on matters related to UFO investigations. In the 1970s, Sheehan was granted permission to review certain files connected to Project Blue Book. Project Blue Book was the United States Air Force's official program that studied reports of unidentified flying objects, otherwise known as UFOs. Even though many documents from the project had already been released to the public, some materials remained classified. Because of his role and legal background, Sheehan was allowed to view some levels of information that were not available to the public. During his time looking through these classified materials, Sheehan came across a photograph that stood out to him. The photo was taken by a satellite and showed what appeared to be a craft that did not seem to be made by human technology, otherwise known as non-human intelligence. It was not simply a blurry image or something that could be easily explained away. The photograph clearly captured a structured object with a solid form, and importantly, there were visible symbols or markings on the surface of the craft. These symbols appeared to be carefully placed and were not random or natural. They gave the impression that whoever built the craft wanted to leave a specific message. Years later, when Sheehan learned about the Rendlesham Forest incident that took place in December of 1980, he noticed something that brought his earlier experience back to his mind. Sheehan recognized the symbols described in the Rendlesham event were extremely similar to the ones he had seen years earlier on the photograph in the classified Project Blue Book files. This connection suggested that the same intelligence or the same type of technology had been active across different times and places. To Sheehan, this was a sign that the government had knowledge of non-human craft before incidents like Rendlesham became public. Hello everyone, I'm Anomaly Files. Thank you for watching this deep dive on the Rendlesham Forest incident. Peace out.